In today's episode, we're going to walk through exactly how estrogen leaves your body and what disrupts that process, and why the standard advice keeps failing women who are already doing a lot of the right things. By the end of this episode, you're going to understand your own physiology better and at a level that most practitioners struggle to explain to you. And you're going to have a much more clear picture of exactly where to focus if you're finding yourself in a high estrogen state. Welcome back to the Physique Development Podcast. I am your host, Alex Bush, and estrogen is the topic of the day. If your estrogen has been elevated on your labs for months, or maybe even longer than that, and you've tried a lot of different things that you're supposed to try and you have not had any success, this episode is specifically for you. Because the conversation around high estrogen is almost entirely focused in the wrong place, in my opinion. And I don't say that to be a contrarian. I say it because I've worked with hundreds of women who have done everything right. They've taken the right supplements. They've done different things within their diet. They've made the lifestyle changes, and the needle simply hasn't moved. They stayed in this high estrogen state. And when we dug into the why and got more into the weeds of exactly what was going on internally in their body, it came back to the same thing almost every single time. It was more about how the estrogen was exiting their body, not just the estrogen itself. Let's dig in. Before we dig into what's going wrong, let's establish what's supposed to happen, because most people, and honestly, a lot of coaches, skip this part entirely. Estrogen doesn't just disappear from your body on its own. It doesn't just poof into dust. It has a very specific exit route, and if that exit route gets disrupted at any point, the estrogen doesn't leave. It recirculates, and that recirculation is what shows up as elevated estrogen on your labs. I want to paint a picture for you how this works. I want you to visualize your liver is the post office, all right? So your liver is the very first stop. When your estrogen has done its job throughout your body, it gets sent to the liver for processing. The liver puts it through what's called phase 2 detoxification. And during that time, you're essentially packaging the estrogen up, binding it to a compound that makes it water soluble, and it is ready to be excreted. So we're packaging everything at the post office, we're sealing it up, we're labeling it, and it's ready for shipping. Bile is what picks up the packaged estrogen. So we're going to look at the bile as the UPS truck. Bile is produced by the liver and stored in the gallbladder. And once it is released into the small intestine, that's when it carried that packaged estrogen from the liver into the intestines, where it continues to move through and eventually exit the body through your stool. So that UPS truck has a long journey, but I'm realizing as I'm going through this analogy that UPS truck doesn't really have a way to come back unless the wrong thing is happening, which we'll dig into in here in just a moment. But it goes from the liver, through the bile, into the intestines, and excreted out through our stool. That's the entire route. And when it's working, estrogen clears efficiently and your levels stay in a more balanced position. But there are multiple points along that chain where things can break down. And when they do, that estrogen that was supposed to leave just continues to be recirculated. And that's what we're going to unpack here. The most overlooked piece of this entire conversation is bile flow. And I want to spend real time here because this is where the breakdown happens for so many women and no one is really talking about it. If bile isn't moving properly, the exit doors stay closed. And it doesn't matter how well your liver processes the estrogen. If the bile isn't carrying it out, it is not going anywhere. So the question becomes, what kills the bile flow? The first domino is low stomach acid. I know that sounds like it has nothing to do with estrogen, but stick with me. Your gallbladder doesn't just release bile randomly. It gets a signal, and that signal comes from a hormone called cholecystokinin. I think I'm saying that right, which is released by your small intestine in response to food. But that whole cascade depends on your stomach doing its job first. By having adequate stomach acid, that is what triggers the proper digestive sequence that eventually tells your gallbladder to contract and release the bile. When stomach acid is low, which is extremely common in men and women who are chronically stressed, that signal is very, very weak. The gallbladder doesn't get a strong enough cue, the bile release is sluggish, and estrogen clearance suffers as a result. The second piece is your nervous system. This one hits super close to home for so many of the women that we work with. Your body operates in two states. We have sympathetic, which is more of your stress response, and we have parasympathetic, which is your rest and digest. Digestion, detoxification, and bile flow all happen optimally in a parasympathetic state. When you're chronically stressed, running on poor sleep, overextended, always on, your body is spending so much of its time in a sympathetic dominant state. And it's not prioritizing bile production and estrogen clearance when it's under that much stress. This is a massive piece of why addressing hormones in isolation almost never produces lasting results. You can't detoxify efficiently in a body that's stuck in survival mode. And then there's the gallbladder itself. If yours has been removed, this becomes an absolute non-negotiable. Your gallbladder is the reservoir that concentrates bile and releases it in response to meals. Without it, you lose that on-demand release mechanism. Bile still gets produced by the liver, but it drips continuously rather than releasing in the concentrated bolus your body actually needs for proper fat digestion and estrogen clearance. If you've had your gallbladder removed and nobody has addressed bile support, this is almost certainly the key factor for you.
Low reps is best.
High reps is best.
Fruit is so
It's
good.
terrible for
you should lift heavy.
High reps,
Carbs
low
are
weight.
needed.
Keto
Squats
for
are
life.
bad for your
Squats
knees.
are great
You
for
should
your knees.
squat
Knees over
astragalus.
toes.
It's fine. It fits my
Macros is
macros.
for idiots.
When there are so many mixed messages going around, it's hard to know what you should even do or focus on. But that's exactly where physique development one-on-one coaching comes in. You might have heard of online coaching or even hired a coach before, but we believe in teaching you the why behind what we do while truly taking your life into consideration. We want to train, educate, and empower you to reach your goals and help you to stop spinning your wheels and just finally feel good. And hey, we're here to help you look good too. You need you. Your health is your wealth. So join Physique Development and let us be the last coach you ever need.
Now that you've got your visual of the exit route and we've talked about how bile flow can be disrupted, there's one more layer that I think is the most underappreciated part of this entire conversation. And again, even if your liver is doing its job perfectly, phase 2 detoxification is complete. Estrogen is packaged and ready to leave. There is a mechanism in your gut that can completely undo all of that. Certain strains of gut bacteria produce an enzyme called beta-glucuronidase. When these bacteria are overgrown, beta-glucuronidase levels can rise. And what this enzyme does is essentially the opposite of what your liver just spent energy doing. Remember how I talked about your liver packages up estrogen, puts it into a box, and seals it to be removed? Beta-glucuronidase opens that box. It separates that binding compound that your liver attached to the estrogen, converts it back into its active form, and now, instead of continuing through the intestines and exiting through your stool, it gets reabsorbed through the intestinal wall and goes right back into circulation. So in this case, your liver completed phase 2, estrogen was perfectly packaged, bile was carrying it out, and your gut bacteria said, buddy, we're intercepting this and sending it back into circulation. This is a big reason why you can have women who eat extremely well. They support liver detoxification. They take supplements like DIM. They're doing everything they've been told to do, and their estrogen remains elevated because downstream of all of that, their gut is actively working against the clearance process. And here's the real kicker of how this goes missed so often. Elevated beta-glucuronidase won't show up on a standard hormone panel. It won't show up unless someone is specifically running a comprehensive stool analysis like a GI map and looking for it. Most conventional testing won't include this. So it just keeps happening in the background while everyone focuses on the hormones themselves. So you're probably asking what drives the overgrowth of these bacteria in the first place. It could be diet choices, antibiotic use, chronic stress, low fiber intake, disrupted gut motility, and a lot of the same things that would compromise gut health in general, which is a reason why this isn't some rare edge type case. This is something I see consistently in the women that we work with who present with stubborn high estrogen. And if you've been nodding your head this entire episode, you're just like, bro, this is me. I'm sure that you've been managing these symptoms for a long time. Maybe you've seen multiple practitioners or you've tried many supplements. You've cleaned up your diet. You've worked to reduce your stress as much as you reasonably can. And your labs are still showing that elevated estrogen. And your symptoms, the bloating, the mood shifts, the weight that won't move, the sleep that isn't feeling restorative is all still there. And you're probably just wondering, like, is this just how it's going to be for forever? And as you're listening and nodding your head along of, okay, now that I have a better understanding, how am I actually going to fix this? And it really comes down to assessing that clearance pathway that we've spent so much time talking about, not just the hormone level itself, because the hormone level is just telling us an output, but we have to better understand the process and where it's breaking down in the process of it all. And so it would be crazy of me to sit here and say, hey, you need to take these supplements and do this to de-stress because you've done those things, right? We need to get into further testing to better understand where that process is breaking. And so being able to extract a GI map would be a advantageous testing to look at, getting a more inclusive look at the breakdown of your estrogen, because typically on your panels, you're going to see just estradiol, which is E2. We have other pathways, E1, E2, and E3, that are estrogens that we are producing and pathways that are being addressed, and having an understanding of how that breaks down and seeing the total estrogen is going to be tremendously advantageous. And this is where our one-on-one individualized coaching really shines, because it's not just a single hormone panel. It's not just a single supplement. It's a methodical process of identifying exactly where your specific clearance pathway is breaking down and building a plan around that, and more specifically around you and your life. Because many of the stressors and things that you have going on a day-to-day basis are not going to go away. We need to improve your bandwidth and your capacity for the stress, and that is where the specificity really comes in and shines. And that's the work that we do within our one-on-one coaching. And it's why the results look different when you're working from the actual mechanism rather than just looking at the symptoms. Another component to this that we didn't get to talk about in this episode when it comes to estrogen is the estrogen being unopposed by low progesterone, being another big factor why you are struggling to sleep or seeing the fat loss that you desire. And so I can do a follow-up episode on that topic. But the last thing I'll leave you with today is that if this episode resonated with you, if you heard yourself somewhere in here, the next best step is to reach out. You can DM me on Instagram at @AlexBush__, or you can find the link to apply for the one-on-one coaching in the show notes below. I'd love to hear what you've been dealing with and talk through whether working with us makes total sense for you or going a different route. At the end of the day, my goal is for you to feel your absolute best, functioning at your absolute best, living your best life. That's why we record these episodes for free and provide all the knowledge and resources that we do. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.